Hello everyone, Michael here from Mirrors of Consciousness and creator of the Orbifold Tarot and yes, the upcoming Arcanum X Tarot. I know many of you have been waiting for the Arcanum X Tarot and want to know what the status is of that, and so I'm going to get into that. It's been a long time since I've uploaded a video here, and so I wanted to post an update on what's going on with everything. So first of all, there are still Orbifold Tarots available, so you can always go to my website or the website for the Orbifold Tarot, www.orbifoldtarot.com, not that complicated, and you can go ahead and order either size of the Orbifold Tarot. It has been a long time since I posted, and I did take a pause from working on the Arcanum X Tarot for a while. I've worked on I've continued working on the Arcanum X, but I did take a little break from it, or a couple of little breaks from it, because about a year and a half ago, something happened in my regular day job life that forced me to refocus quite severely on my other projects. So as some of you know, my day job, my quote-unquote real job, is that I'm a yoga teacher. So that's my career, and as part of that I had been working on a book, well, a couple of books, but I had been working on one project, one large book, for several years, in fact, before I even did the Orbifold Tarot. The designing of the Orbifold Tarot was actually a little bit of a break. I kind of took it on as a little bit of a break from writing my yoga book, and then of course it kind of took on its own little life, which was great, and it became something more than just a side project, which is awesome. But in the process, it also took me away from that project that I've been working for a very long time on. So shortly after some of the last videos that I posted on YouTube, I shifted my focus to really hunker down and finish the book and get it out and published, which I did do. So here it is. It's this nice big book, and it's fully illustrated, full instructions. There's a ton of information. It's actually a book of 36 poses. I know it looks like a little bit more than 36 poses, but that's because it's each pose is broken down into 4 stages: the simplify stage, explore, nourish, and synthesize. And so it goes through step by step. If it's like the very first time you've ever done a pose, like for instance, the best example is probably downward facing dog, which many people struggle with, especially when it's introduced. You know, you have your hands on the floor and you're bearing your body weight, and you maybe don't have the flexibility in your hips and your hamstrings and your armpits, and you feel like you don't have the strength in your arms and all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot going on in the pose, even though it's considered a beginner pose and it's introduced very quickly to beginners. A lot of beginners feel overwhelmed by it because there's so much going on. So as that example, we have this version of the pose, which is the wall push, and so that would be the example of the first stage of any of these poses. Would be that in my opinion is the best introduction to the pose. And then the next stage is the same thing, the downward facing dog, though with the hands on a chair, and then it just progresses that way, and it gives the full instructions on how to set up for the pose, like what props you need and how to set up those props, how to get into the pose, what to do while you're there, how to get out of it safely. Sometimes that's pretty easy, but sometimes it's more complicated. And then there's a whole section on problems that you might encounter while you're there. So your shoulders hurt, or your wrists hurt, or your back sways, or all of these kind of different issues that people have in yoga poses, and then the solutions, the possible solutions. Now, because of the layout, it's not necessarily as complete as it could be if you were seeing an instructor privately, or certain teachers might go into that more extensive detail in some classes, but it is much more extensive than most of the books available out there. And so part of what that project took me a very long time to complete, partly because it's written in point form, everything is very concise, very, very succinct, but it was really important to me to get everything in the right order, have use the minimal amount of words, and yet give the maximum amount of instruction. And there's actually a whole bunch of other information on the page, the way it's laid out, beyond just the instructions. But I won't go into too much of that, because most of you guys are here for my tarot stuff and not for my yoga stuff. But for those of you who are also yoga adepts, I invite you to check the book out. It's called Yoga Point and Process, and it's available on Amazon.com. I do also have an order website for the book, but unless you're in Canada, it's probably easier for you to just order from Amazon. And I still get a residual and all of that. It works out pretty much as well for me, and probably better for you if you order it from Amazon, or I know it's also on other booksellers like Barnes and Noble, and in Canada, Chapters Indigo. I think it's on Book Depository, so it's easy to find. So I'll put the name again down in the description. And so that book kind of really caused me to shift my focus back onto my career, my day job career as a yoga teacher. And so I really needed to shift away from tarot and from Arcanum X and posting videos on tarot for quite some time. I sat in a cafe 10, 12 hours a day for the last 6 months before it was published, to finish it and get it ready. And then because of that shift in focus, I've been working on additional writing projects, again related to yoga. There's at least 5 or 6 more yoga books in me, and I want to get them out. But as for my tarot practices, I've continued doing readings, working with the Orbifold Tarot. The Arcanum X is on the back burner, but it's not. I haven't abandoned the project. The time that it's taken, or is taking, has partly been because of the research involved in figuring out which plants to use for each card, because I don't necessarily want each plant to have a direct meaning, because of course part of the thing with the Marseille is that the meanings are much more open, but at the same time I still want to get an essence of kind of what that particular card is generally about, but then also stay somewhat true to the forms of the classical Marseille. So melding the two, there may be some plants that are like, oh well, this is the perfect plant for this card, but the shapes, the shape of the leaves or the shape of the flowers, don't really have any relationship with the shape of the foliage on a more traditional Marseille tarot. So I've been trying to merge those through the process. And so as for the minors, they're pretty much done. There's a couple more cards left to do. The drawing itself doesn't take that long. The art doesn't really take that long. It takes maybe a day to draw 1 or 2 cards. I mean, some take a little bit longer if I change my mind a bunch, but they don't take too long to draw. And then the coloration process also doesn't take super long, a few hours per card. But it is kind of that research process. And additionally, the main reason creatively why it's stalled at the moment is I'm really at a loss as to what to do with the quartz and the majors. I want to keep the theme of the Arcanum X, so X, unnamed, unknown, ambiguous a little bit. And so creatively, it's just, I know that visually people are like really on board with what they've seen so far. Those that are into Marseille Tarot, you're really on board with what you've seen so far. And I love it too. And in the process, I've also learned a lot more about the Marseille Tarot, and where I began the project thinking I want to delineate, I want to define the plants a little bit more, so that it's not just these ambiguous plants, but it's clear that, you know, 7 of Wands on Arcanum X is gladiolus, and you know, Ace of Coins is oak and mistletoe. And but I've, in the process, in the research and in working more with the Marseille Tarot, I've started to appreciate the ambiguity more. So in a way, like just in my head, Arcanum X, even though visually it's really beautiful and I still believe in the project and I still want to finish it, I'm not fully on board with it intellectually anymore. And so reconciling that, and that's fine. Like I have no problem with reconciling that, because I think that the delineation is pretty, is nice, and we'll see how it reads. I'm sure it's going to read fine, but it's just not the direction that my interest in Marseille Tarot has been lately. And then on top of that, how do I maintain that same visual look and that same concept into the people cards? So I've had ideas about things that I want to incorporate into the majors and into certain court cards, and I still want to stay true to the theme, the idea of maintaining the forms, the general forms of the Marseille Tarot. So it's not just something that's called a Marseille just because it's a pip deck, but it really follows the Marseille pattern. But then there's all this, you know, do I, well, I won't go into all of the internal debates that I have about how to handle the court cards in the majors, but I just haven't landed somewhere. I've had lots of ideas, but I just haven't landed somewhere that's like, that's the thing. And, you know, I've been a creative person for 40 years now. So, I mean, I wasn't creating when I was 1 year old, but I've been a creative person all my life. And so I know when things kind of fit into place, and it's just like, that's where it is. And then everything just goes. It's like, ta-da. And there are times when you have to just work through that, and you have to try a bunch of things that don't work, and you know they're not going to work, but you do them anyway, and they lead to the result. Even if you trash all of that work, it gets you there. so so I'm in that process. Um, Update on Orbifold land. I am also working on a book for the Orbifold, which I think I announced somewhere. I think I announced in the Orbifold Facebook group. Um, and again, like it's don't don't expect it soon. I mean, I'm hoping it's soon, but uh, you may need to wait a little bit, because again, with the whole ethos of the Orbifold Tarot is that you're supposed to develop your own relationship with the cards and figure out your own way through it. But having worked with the Orbifold more, I have come up with my own methods, my own techniques, my own views about it, and how to work with it, and techniques that work well, like lend themselves well with working with the Orbifold. And so I feel that those are worth sharing and will probably be quite beneficial to people who maybe are afraid of the Orbifold, and may also be quite beneficial and useful for those of you who've been using it for the last however long you've been using it since it came out. So I do want to thank everyone who's ordered the Orbifold, who's continued supporting me in various ways just by sharing your pictures on Instagram and on Facebook about the Orbifold, and just using it in readings. I mean, that's what it's meant for. It's meant to not sit on your shelf and collect dust. It's meant to be used. And I know that for those of you who've not worked with it yet, it looks like it could be intimidating, and you might be afraid that it will just sit on your shelf, after a few readings. But I do promise that it's rich. It looks very simple, but it's rich, and it draws. The beautiful thing I feel about the Orbifold is that it draws the richness out of you, because you as readers, you have so much more in you to offer than really any deck of cards does. And so my hope with the Orbifold is that in its minimalism and its minor clues and in its richness, but its kind of hidden richness, that it sparks that richness within you as the reader. So it brings more of you out. And not that other decks don't do that, and sometimes the more visually complex or more visually intricate decks with more visual cues, they spark things in you too. And it's not the deck that's doing the reading, it's you, and it's bringing stuff out of you. But I really feel that the Orbifold causes you to dig deep, to find a richness in yourself that you may not have known was there or didn't know how to access. So that's the challenge with creating a book, is how do I create a book about the Orbifold that is accessible to people, isn't too intellectual, although it's a little intellectual, but also encourages you to want to read, to want to work with it, to want to study yourself and to develop your relationship with tarot and with the cards. And I have some fun things to include in the book that I haven't put anywhere else, but it may take me a little while. There's another Orbifold related project also in the works, which when I get to it, it will be quick. I'm not going to announce what it is. A couple of you know what it is already, but I'm not going to announce what it is. But once I get around to working it, it will be quick. It will probably be a small run, though, and we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. And lastly, I would like to return to doing more videos again and just sharing different things with you, what I'm interested in, what I've been doing lately. I know many of you have been waiting also for the continuation of the Marseille Tarot series. I believe I have a little bit of footage that I have to go and find from that series that I had already recorded. So I'll go and find that and I'll post it. And there were some more Orbifold videos that I wanted to do for you. And lately, I've actually been really interested in playing Cartomancy, which is, some of you play with that, and that's great. There are many different kind of schools of thought, ways in with playing Cartomancy, and one of the simplest ways to start with that, I guess, is basically just to read playing cards as you would tarot. So far I've been kind of interested in the system itself. There's a lot of similarities with tarot. Of course they stem from the same root, but there's enough interesting differences between playing cards and tarot that I figure if I'm going to use playing cards, I might as well use those differences, take advantage of those differences. So I'll probably be posting a few Cartomancy videos as well, and I hope you'll enjoy those. So to recap, Arcanum X is not abandoned, but it is delayed. I'm sorry. I know that people don't like to hear this, but it'll be finished when it's finished. But it is, I haven't abandoned it. It's on the way. I really want to finish it. By all means, if you're interested in yoga, especially if you really want some quality instruction, an instructional booklet, no book can replace a live teacher. However, if you're going to get an instruction book on yoga, I really believe that this is probably one of the most comprehensive. You will learn so much. If you are a teacher, it's already being used for many teacher trainings, so if you're a teacher, get it. It will help you immensely. Even if you're teaching a different style, that's fine. You don't have to take everything as rules or anything like that, but it'll be an excellent resource for you. And Orbifold Tarot book coming. I am more than willing to receive your feedback about, one, thoughts about how to handle the court cards for Arcanum X, and two, what kind of material you'd like to see in an Orbifold book. And then number 4 of the recap is more videos coming soon on Marseille, Orbifold, and playing cards. So I'm gonna see you soon, and great to be back. Oh, and just a quick plug. Yes, this is the death card from the Orbifold Tarot on a t-shirt. T-shirts are available at redbubble.com. I'll put the link in the down bar. T-shirts, hoodies, blankets, they have all kinds of products, and several Orbifold designs are on them. So check it out.